Lamborghini Huracan, exploring the intersection of livable and supercars. Is there something more than 12 volts coming to your next car? And top 5 car technologies we need Apple and Google to fix. It's time to check the tech. We see cars differently. Nice. We love them on the road and under the hood, but also check the tech and are known for telling it like it is.
Ugly is included at no extra cost.
The good, the bad, the bottom line. This is CNET On Cars.
Welcome to CNET On Cars, the show all about high-tech cars and modern driving. I'm Brian Cooley. When I mention supercars to you, you probably think about some kind of a hand-built bauble that costs a fortune, purchased by rich folks who almost never drive them. A garage queen. And you'd basically be right. But then we get to cars like the Lamborghini Huracan that exemplify an interesting trend I've noticed in the supercar business lately, to make these things more livable day to day. And that also brings in a lot of new technology. Let's drive the Huracan and check the tech.
This is what replaces the Gallardo, the best-selling Lamborghini ever. And it replaces it with a major leap forward in technology and demeanor. When Lamborghini set out to replace the Gallardo, they wielded a lot of new and improved technology. Adaptive electronic steering, magnetic fluid adaptive suspension, blessedly now a dual clutch instead of single clutch automated gearbox, an Audi Quattro-related all-wheel drive system, a dramatically new LCD instrument panel, and a body with clean, subtle aerodynamics, not obnoxious cutouts or powered rear wings.
Now, as Lamborghinis go, I actually find this vehicle understated and elegant. The whole structure of this car is a composite of some carbon pieces, some aluminum pieces, a lot of sandwiching and blending of the two. It's not a true carbon tub with aluminum subframes.
Instead, it's a glued and riveted sandwich of the two materials, especially at the cowl and down the spine. Lamborghini calls this a carbon hybrid.
Blessedly conventional doors. Do you really need this? And then you've got the glass cover on the engine, which is beautiful and clean, but no, that's an option. Normally you'd have a busier set of louvers there. That's the best $7,000 you'll ever spend. Now inside the Huracan, things are decidedly more modern than the Gallardo it replaced. Look at that instrument panel. It's a 12-inch side-to-side all LCD. Driven by an NVIDIA Tegra processor. You've also got another LCD over here that's a fixed set of engine gauges. Now back to the main one. Interesting behavior here. You can have sort of a split screen where you have instrumentation on the left and you've got your infotainment interface on the right. Hold a button here on the wheel and then you go into a full screen of your Audi-inspired MMI. You'll recognize and have seen that before. Hold the button again and now you go to a full instrumentation layout. Hold another button, and that can go between full tach and full speedo. There's no other interface quite like this. It's also nice when you go in reverse, you get your reverse camera right there in front of you. In fact, everything's in front of you. This is an interesting vision of moving things away from the glance-away center head stack to right in front of the driver. And of course, related to all that stuff in the dash is a pretty familiar, kind of last-generation Audi MMI interface. Now onto the drive controls. This vehicle is not like any other in that respect either. Here on the wheel, everything has gone kind of motorcycle-like. Notice there are no stalks around the column. Only a couple of properly mounted, stalk-based shift paddles. Left is downshift, right is upshift. Instead, things that used to be on stalks are here. Here's my high beam switch. Here is my left-right turn signal switch. Wipers are over here. And then down here on the bottom, here's where my drive personality controls are. Sport, Strada, Corsa. We'll talk more about those on the road. Back here on the backbone, you've got a locked down start-stop button. That's just some great Hollywood theater there. And of course, what would a supercar be without cool toggles to play with? And here's a rack of those for things like windows, hazards, and most importantly on this guy, the optional nose lifter. Under glass is the heart of the beast, the 5.2-liter V10, naturally aspirated, no turbos, no supercharger. They do it the old-fashioned way. 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. That's what happens when you've got 602 horse. Notably, though, only 413 pound-feet of torque. This guy's a rever, not a puller.
Now, while this engine breathes conventionally, it drinks via two technologies, both port and direct injection, something a number of automakers are doing more of lately to optimize fuel delivery across the entire RPM and load range.
7-speed dual-clutch automated manual gearbox is very different than that Gallardo we had, which had a single-clutch automated manual and was on the bulky side. This promises to be much more refined. Oh, by the way, if you care, the MPG is 1420 on this guy. That's actually not bad. The days of single-digit MPG supercars are just about over.
Almost immediately, I notice how this car's got a really nice transmission. Because it's a dual clutch, we don't have all that jerkiness that the single clutch automated manuals are known for. Instead, the shifts are super smooth, plenty quick. Of course, it depends if you're in Strada, Sport, or Corsa. When you move those drive modes on the wheel, you affect a lot of things. You're going to change your throttle mapping so you get more power sooner. You change your steering ratio if you have the adaptive steering option. You're going to change the way the adaptive suspension operates. You're also going to change the way the stability control is going to dial in. You're going to change the shift points and how aggressive and quick those happen. It really transforms a lot of things about the car. Now, this car's also got an interesting set of sensors. The accelerometers and the gyros are three-dimensional. So you've got X, Y, and Z, which Lamborghini says is really helping them get some real dimension and real-world flavor into how they modify all of those drive systems. You know my favorite compliment for any car? It feels light. It feels light. And when you feel light, you feel fast. Well, one of the things you're also hearing about this car is the exhaust that changes when you go into Sport or Corsa. They open up some baffles and you get this nice back crackle. Beautiful sounding thing. Now, there are some Lamborghini quirks that make this car a bit of a pain in the ass to live with. I don't quite fit. I'm leaned way back and my knees are all bunched up. The other thing is, when you get a windshield this rakish and cheeky, you also end up with some great big A-pillars that really get in the way of tackling corners. Okay, let's get you all budgeted to buy your Huracan. $241,000 is your entry point with destination. Now we got to add a handful of things to get it CNET style. Adaptive steering is $2,400, the adaptive suspension's $3,400. Navigation is an awfully steep $3,200. Rear cam, you're gonna need it. That includes backup sensors, nearly $4,000. The nose lifter will save you twice its price the first time you find a curb. That's $6,900. And the glass engine lid, I love it, $7,000. All in, we're at about $268, but who's counting? This is a very livable, approachable car that is also extreme when you want it to be, but not when you don't. This is a very interesting story, and I see it bubbling up all over the supercar market, and perhaps nowhere expressed better than right here. By the way, if you want more Lamborghini, head over to CNETOnCars.com and just search Lamborghini. You'll find my takes on the Aventador and the Gallardo, which preceded the Huracan. A $100 Rolex will at most damage your ego when it's found out. But fake car parts raise the stakes considerably higher. Coming up, spotting counterfeit car parts when CNET On Cars continues. You're not fooling anybody when a counterfeit brake caliper cracks during a hard stop, or an airbag doesn't deploy, or does, but like a bomb instead of a pillow. One of the most ominous things about poorly made counterfeit parts posing as genuine is that they likely evaded all testing by posing as an original that was tested and basically getting a pass. Even legit low-cost alternative parts are tested. Now, of course, automakers and even junkyards have a vested interest in you buying genuine parts, because that's what they sell in one form or another.
This is a Honda airbag, and this is not.
But the government agencies that intercept and monitor these things are ringing alarm bells, going so far as to suggest you contact the FBI if you suspect you've been sold counterfeit car parts. You don't need to be a shade tree mechanic to spot them. Be wary of too good to be true prices. It's one thing to get a $17 MacBook charger. This is different. Steer away from that guy who approaches you in a parking lot to fix your car. I shouldn't need to tell you that. Be wary of parts purchased online that ship from distant countries, especially countries that aren't really in the car business. And look for typos on the box. Motorcraft and Delphi never misspell their own names. It pays to do a quick double check on the likelihood that you're buying a cheap fake that will damage more than your ego when it reveals itself.
Welcome back to CNET On Cars, coming to you from our home at the Mount Tam Motor Club, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Thanks to increasing amounts of electronic tech and electrically driven components of your car,
there's been a lot of research and movements toward a higher voltage system in your vehicle. Let's take a look at that now in a future-looking Car Tech 101. Today, your car almost certainly uses exclusively 12 volts direct current to do just about everything. You know it. This is the stuff that comes out of the cigarette lighter, or what we call the power port now in your console. But it flows all over your vehicle from taillights to ignition system. Sometimes it's converted to higher voltage for things like high-intensity discharge headlamps, but for the most part, this car is a 12-volt world, and that dates back over 60 years. Before that, it was a 6-volt world in many instances. But now we're cutting the other way, to higher voltage, namely 48. Now, just as 12 volts is a big increase in the ability to get things done and do it efficiently over 6 volts, 48 volts is multi-fold improvement over the current standard. Yet it remains notably below the 50-volt DC line that is generally considered the beginning of substantial shock risk to humans. Now, the main motivation for higher voltage is coming largely from the engine bay. Things that used to be driven by these sloppy parasitic belts off the engine are now being driven by integral electric motors. I'm talking about things like power steering pumps, air conditioning compressors, and water pumps that move coolant around the engine. If you can drive those by electricity, and only when they're needed as opposed to constantly tethered to a belt, you get nice efficiencies, and you also can package things a little more tightly in the engine bay.
And speaking of electrifying things, several automakers are considering using new electric turbochargers, which are spun up by an integral 48-volt motor instead of by passing exhaust gases, which should reduce lag, make the plumbing more compact, and lower fuel consumption while creating that additional power. It goes without saying that EVs already use high voltage, like the 375-volt system that powers a Tesla. And you've seen those orange wire housings inside electric cars and strong hybrids. Those call out the high voltage runs. But those are currently limited to systems that turn the wheels, not much else.
But even if you don't look at a future with strong hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and electric cars, the move to 48 volts seems like it's ready to happen because it grants so much more efficiency to even conventional gas engine cars, allows packaging to be much more flexible, which designers love,
and takes components that sap the engine's rotational energy all the time and convert them to devices that tax mostly the electrical system just part of the time. In a moment, wheel worries and the things that Apple and Google could best improve inside your car when CNET On Cars returns.
The thing that I think we've had the most fun with is we've given it the new sound of electric vehicles. Most of the feedback we've gotten from the performance or car enthusiasts say, the cars are too quiet. We've given it, in my opinion, the right touch of sound. So when you accelerate or decelerate, you get that adrenaline flowing, and it adds a whole different dimension to driving electric vehicles.
Find more from the XCar team of CNET UK at cnet.com/XCar.
Welcome back to CNET On Cars. I'm Brian Cooley. It's that part of the show we take some of your email. Got a twofer this time from Jose O and Chad S, who both ask about wheels. Jose writes in, how about doing a Wheels 101 about the different manufacturing processes for function and aesthetics of wheels? And Chad writes in, I bent a wheel on my Civic EX and on my Evo MR after hitting potholes. Thankfully, I was able to get both of them repaired. I'm curious to see how a bent wheel can affect the tire from taking and holding air. Well guys, first of all, I feel for anyone out there who's had a bent wheel. You know the minute you do it, you hit a pothole and it's harder than usual. The car shakes in a different way and maybe even drives funny right afterwards. And you know, things just got expensive. Alloy wheels have less protection these days than they used to. Lower profile tires provide less cushioning above the circumference of the wheel. And not only are tires getting lower, but maintenance budgets in just about every municipality seem to be getting lower as well. So the roads are pretty crappy out there. I'll do a Car Tech 101 on how wheels are made soon, but know that there are basically two divisions, Jose, in the kind of wheel you buy. Cast wheels or forged wheels. Cast wheels, that's one where hot molten alloy is poured into a form and then cooled and machined. That tends to be a mainstream wheel, affordable, not the highest performance in some cases. Then there's a forged wheel, which is, as the name implies, forged out of a single ingot of alloy material under enormous mechanical pressure. These tend to be very strong wheels. They can be made particularly light. They're often demanded in performance applications. Now, in terms of bending a wheel and fixing it, Chris, this is an area where I recommend you go to a specialist. Ask around, get recommendations from your car club or something, because it's kind of an art to bring this thing back into its perfect shape in several ways. What you want to achieve is three things. First of all, you want to get true back. True means this bead here has to be dead straight to help the tire seal air as well as not lose its seating in the wheel. If you spin it, it shouldn't do this. Wander left and right. That's not good for holding the tire in place or to have a good balance on the wheel. Secondly, you want to have round. You've got a perfect circle again when it's fixed, and there's no divot here in the curvature. The third thing, and it's harder to eyeball this, is metal fatigue. As that metal is bent and then brought back into shape, that fatigues the metal in many cases, often beyond a point of where it's safely serviceable. That can be dangerous. Couple easy ways to eyeball an alloy wheel. If you're looking at it, you can always roll it down a smooth surface and just watch how that bead might move if it's out of true. Take it and put the face or whatever part was damaged on a known flat surface and look for any significant gaps between it and daylight. But in terms of that metallic damage from too much stress of being bent and bent back, I've got no tips for you there. After a lot of promises, mostly broken, in 2014, car makers really are putting Apple CarPlay and Android Auto into new cars this year. This isn't just another technology addition. These two new entrants have the potential to take over some areas that car makers just can't seem to nail. Let's run down the top 5. Now, these are my picks based on spending a lot of time in a lot of cars that try my patience with their cabin tech. And admittedly, limited time poking around CarPlay and Android Auto since they're very, very new. Don't screw this up, guys, and make us both look bad. Here we go. Number 5, dashboard distraction. I put this low because, let's face it, screwing around with infotainment while you drive is still screwing around with infotainment while you drive, no matter who designed it. However, Apple and especially Google are expert at predictive knowledge. Their systems are built to try and know what you mean or want before you're even done inputting it. Nice on a phone, critical in a car. Number 4, lousy user interface. Car makers are all over the road on their UIs. What their screens and displays look like all too often have a single thing in common. They look like hell. Google, and especially Apple, have a look and feel to their platforms that holds together across all screens and ideally across third-party apps. It creates some badly needed consistency. Imagine if cars had the gas pedal on the left and sometimes on the right. Number 3, old media. Even Apple, the folks who invented iTunes, aren't so much in the MP3 game like they used to be. And neither they nor Google were ever married to things like satellite radio, HD radio, CDs. They have no problem quickly embracing the new and dumping the old. Things like streaming choices that come so fast, car makers can often just hope to be 2 generations behind. Number 2, stale POIs. In your car's current navigation rig, points of interest seldom are. They are instead these stiff, rigid, outdated categories of things that take longer to page through than to drive to. And almost never are they aware of what you like. It's mostly collections of obvious things like national chain locations or overly broad categories like museums or cemeteries. Yeah, kill me. Move over and let live search and my preferences and history flourish in the dash. Before I get you to number one, some things that are certainly beyond the ability of Apple and Google to fix, beyond infotainment, like complicated touch screens for temperature control. Why? Blind spot and lane departure warnings that all sound like the same bird chirping, or absurd 180-mile speedometers that crush every increment down so small you can't tell if you're doing 50 or 70 without taking out a magnifying glass. The number one thing that Apple and Google must improve in the dash is maddening voice command. Voice command in cars used to be like magic until smartphones arrived and showed us it's actually more like a gallstone. Get out of the way, car makers. There's no technology you've better proven you shouldn't be involved in than voice command. Add in the fact that voice envelops most of what happens in the dash, and I can't wait to talk to Siri or say, "Okay, Google," behind the wheel.
Calling Peggy Jordan, mobile.
By the way, if you don't want to wait or buy a new car, the aftermarket has beaten car makers to the punch, installing CarPlay and Android Auto systems as we speak into the cars people already own.
Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And of course, keep those emails coming. It's oncars@cnet.com. You're a big part of how we put this show together every episode. And wherever you go for streaming video, look for us. We're probably there. I'll see you next time we check the tech.